Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Charlie Rhindress. Welcome to Stompin Tom Remembered. It's going to be a 6-part series that I'm going to do over the next 6 Thursday nights, and I will be interviewing people who knew and worked with Stompin Tom. I'm the author of a book called Stompin Tom Connors, The Myth and the Man. And the book came out last fall, and this past spring, I was supposed to do a book tour of Ontario, and I was going to go to a number of locations throughout Ontario, and I was going to have as a guest Duncan Fremlin and someone in his band Whiskey Jack, and they were going to play music. And as opposed to me just reading from the book, they were going to play music and tell stories about working with Stompin Tom, and I was going to read from the book. And so it was going to be an interesting kind of reading tour, and that got canceled. So instead, we decided to we came up with this series. And what we're going to do is I've got a Facebook page called Stompin Tom Connors, The Myth and the Man, which some of you, I assume, already follow because that's where you're finding me right now. I'll be posting stuff on there, research I found while I was doing the book, and interesting interviews and rare clips and stuff like that. But every Thursday night, live from this page at 8 o'clock Atlantic time, I'll be doing an interview with someone who knew Tom or worked with Tom or dealt with Tom in a professional manner or knew him on a personal level. So I'm really excited about it. I've written 2 biographies. I wrote this Stompin Tom book, but I also wrote a biography of Rita McNeil called I'm Not What I Seem. And one of the more exciting things for me in doing the research is talking to people who knew these artists, because quite often they knew other people as well, and they'll just randomly say, oh, when I played with Johnny Cash, or when I did this, or whatever. So I find the interviews for the books are often the more exciting part of putting the book together. So I'm glad that I get to share that with you. So if any of you ever saw, I didn't have the chance to actually see Stompin Tom live. We're going to go to our first guest in just a minute. I'm just going to do a little more intro. I never had a chance to see Stompin Tom live, but for those of you who did, I'm told he was amazing in a live performance. My brother-in-law said he was more connected to the audience than almost anyone he'd ever met before. And I heard that over and over when I was researching the book. And I've got a little chunk of the book I'm going to read. When Tom had his comeback in 1990, he allowed CBC cameras in to record a little bit of the rehearsal. And it sort of leads into where we're going with Duncan here. So I'm going to read a little tiny bit of the book for you. The only time that Tom allowed cameras to film any of the 1999 concerts was in Summerside, PEI, when the CBC produced a story about the tour. Tom can be heard saying from the stage, in case you thought you were coming to see a concert tonight, you were wrong. You came to a party. Although Tom had moved from bars to gymnasiums, arenas, and concert halls, he still tried to create a party atmosphere at his shows. He asked that the house lights be left on in the venues where he performed. He told Rudy Blair, I like looking into the eyes of the people that I'm relating to. There's a lot of rapport that goes on between me and my audience. I'm not one for spotlights in my eyes. I don't want spotlights. I want to see everyone in the audience. We become one. The band, myself, and the audience. On the promo CD for Believe in Your Country, Tom said that something magical happened when he hit the stage. He said it was hard to explain, but there was something that goes through the air. There's kind of an electricity or a rapport or something. And once that connects, once I get the first couple of lines out and I feel something happening, then all hell breaks loose and we have a hell of a time. Duncan Fremlin said, I can't even think of another performer who would stand on stage and encourage hooting and hollering from the stage. He'd actually converse with the fans who were hollering out songs and whatnot. He never got angry with that. He felt like they were all on the same level. A show with Tom was like a show in his kitchen, and the people in the audience were guests at his house. When it was suggested to Mickey Andrews, who was another bandmate of Tom's, that Tom's shows were like a kitchen party, he readily agreed, saying, that's a good term. Kitchen party is right. He created his own Stompin Tom party, whether the venue was big or small or anywhere. So for that reason, I'm coming to you from my kitchen. So Tom tried to create a kitchen party. Tonight won't exactly be a kitchen party, although Duncan is going to play a little bit of music, and I'm sure we're going to have some laughs. But I am coming to you from my kitchen in Amherst, Nova Scotia. Duncan's coming to us from somewhere in Ontario. I think he's in Toronto. I'm pretty sure. He'll tell us in just a minute. But I got one other quick quote I want to read here just before I bring Duncan on. Tom left behind a rich legacy of stories and characters. Margot with her cargo, Big Joe Mufferaw, Bud the Spud, Red River Jane, and Ben from the Pen all live on in the imagination of Canadians. So does the character of Stompin Tom. But Stompin Tom was very different from Tom Connors. Duncan Fremlin wrote, his onstage persona was lowbrow, I think intentionally so. he went to great extremes to demonstrate to his fans that Stompin' Tom was not just humble and educated, but an illiterate country bumpkin. Those of us in Tom's inner circle knew that he was anything but a country bumpkin. When I wrote the book, the reason I called it The Myth and the Man is because I think a lot of people confuse Tom Connors, the man, with Stompin' Tom Connors, the character. And I tried to get to that in the book. And one of the people who helped me the most with that was Duncan Fremlin. He's one of the first people I interviewed for the book. And so I hope that over the course of these 6 interviews over the next 6 weeks, every Thursday night, you'll join us and you'll learn a little more about not just Stompin' Tom, the performer, because you can listen to his music and watch him in video and stuff, but Tom Connors, the man. So I'm going to bring on Duncan Fremlin. Duncan started out as a folk singer. He says he was not a very good folk singer, and then he picked up the banjo when he was about 27, and he started a band called Whiskey Jack. They went on to be a regular on the Tommy Hunter Show, and then he ended up recording and touring with Stompin' Tom, and that kind of changed his life. It led to a couple of different projects. He wrote his own book, and he also does a touring show as a tribute to Tom, and we're going to talk about all that. So I'm going to bring him on now. So enough of me. Here we go. Here's Duncan Fremlin. Hey, Duncan.
We can never have enough of you, Charlie.
I didn't know, Tom. They want to see you. They want to hear you talk.
I'll tell some stories, I'm sure.
Now, Duncan, I started to say, we're going to go back on all this, but I didn't hold up your book. I wrote a book, but Duncan also wrote a book called My Good Times with Stompin' Tom. And I think he might read a little or at least tell us some stories. Did you sign this? Oh, yeah, you did. Look. You signed a very nice inscription to me. I bought this. It was research for my book. I quoted you a number of times, Duncan. So just before we get going, let's just talk about you for a minute before we talk about you and Stompin' Tom. So you said to me, I don't know if you used the word crappy, but it was something like that. You said not a very good folk singer.
Well, I was from that era where everybody had a guitar and we're all sitting around campfires and we all wanted to be Bob Dylan or whatever. And I just lucked out. I looked into, I grew up with this music, right? Up in Sault Ste. Marie, just outside Sault Ste. Marie, a little place called Bar River. And there was a DJ up there, Don Ramsey was his name. And Donna Ramsey was his daughter. Donna was on the Tommy Hunter Show okay. Yeah, so she was a regular in the Tommy Hunter Show. So she and I kind of reconnected at that point. So I grew up on this kind of music. So, one day I went to a bluegrass festival and I camped beside a guy named Gord Braithwaite from Richmond Hill, Ontario. And I watched him play banjo all weekend. And I thought, geez, I can do that.
Wow.
I'm going to call that hard. So I went and rented a banjo on the Monday. And I guess a year later, I was teaching banjo at the Mill Wheel in Toronto. And shortly after that, I was on the road with my pal, John Hoffman, and we were touring the country.
Wow. And so how long? Well, you're sitting there with a banjo on your lap. Now I want to hear you play a little. Can you just
it's not a banjo. It's the banjola.
It's a banjola. Now, what's a banjola?
I thought it'd be more gentle for this.
Okay.
It's an instrument. I'm glad you asked about this because it's an instrument made by my good friend Edward Dick, who lives in Denver, Colorado. He used to own a music store in Peterborough and moved to Colorado many years ago. And he always had this idea of banjo's kind of can I use the word abrasive? It's loud.
Yeah,
steel picks on steel strings. So he wanted something a little more gentle. And so he invented this instrument. It's called a banjola. This is a nylon string banjola, but he also makes steel string banjolas and 6-string banjolas, and they're all very kind of lute. It's got
it's much gentler than a banjo.
It's a very, I like to say, it's a wife friendly banjo.
My girlfriend plays a banjolele, which is part banjo, part ukulele. So it's a similar sound. Do you want to play just a little for us, just so we can hear?
Just. You might think it's goofy, but the man in the moon is a newfie. He's sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory.
That's great. Okay, we're going to talk about that song in a little bit because I know you like that song in particular. It's got a beautiful sound to it.
It's kind of a lute kind of
Yeah.
sound to it. But
So now,
anyway, I thought it'd be more friendly with this
yeah,
this
it
setup.
sounds
Yeah.
great. So then, so you ended up forming a band called Whiskey Jack. You guys have been
Yeah.
together quite a while, right? Like since
40 some odd years. Yeah.
40. Wow.
Just keeps going. Yeah.
And how did you end up? You ended up on the. You were the house band on the Tommy Hunter show. Is
No,
that
no,
right, or
no, no,
just a
no,
regular band, regular
no.
appearances?
Yeah, yeah. The young musicians today, I kind of hate talking about this because they grew up in the wrong era. In my era, there was so much money flowing. The CBC's budget was enormous. We had radio performances, we had TV performances, we had so many opportunities to play live music in the 70s and 80s, early 80s at least. And so we got a call. They were looking for. They had a segment, a special segment from the Tommy Hunter show. They were going to do called the Old Back Porch, and the idea was that they'd get a band, a 4-piece band, to come out, play a little bluegrass music, knock on the door, and out would come Grandpa Jones or
Okay.
Ray Stevens or some comedian, Cousin Clem or whoever. They'd come out, tell a few jokes, and then we'd play them off. And so we had, it was a regular segment for a few years. And then they sold it to the Nashville network. So we got a few more years out of it. So a lot of people think we were on the TV for 10 years, and we were on TV for 10 years, but we didn't record 10 years worth of material. So anyway,
Wow.
it was, you can imagine it was a career defining appearance. And it took our act from this level to this level, like overnight, just
Totally.
overnight.
Well, growing up, like back in in the 70s and even into the 80s, like Tommy Hunter show and Beachcomber, it's like there's certain Canadian shows that were classic shows that were on all the time because a lot of us didn't even have cable back then. So the Tommy Hunter show, I know my dad loved those stories he told sitting on the stool at the end of the show. Like it was a regular show in our house. So
yeah, it was an hour-long show. It was watched in its prime by 2.5 or 3 million Canadians imagine that every show would have that kind of audience. It's sort of like the Don Messer crowd, only Tommy tried to appeal to a larger country. Don Messer was kind of a regional old-time fiddle kind of style, but Tommy tried, he brought in it's funny. I'll just tell a quick story. Stompin Tom used to watch me on the Tommy. He told me he would watch me on the Tommy Hunter show. So we would talk about it occasionally on the road, years later. But I never did ask him about this. But Tom was, his big thing was that Canadians were spending many thousands of dollars to bring up Americans to perform at Canadian shows when Canadians were available to do it. And, so that pissed him off and he sent his Junos back. But, little did he, I'm sure he must have known, but the Tommy Hunter show, I mean, they would fly up 8-piece bands from Nashville, pay them, put them up, give them nice food, pay them union scale, like just throw money at these guys. And must have just driven Tom over the top to see this kind of money being spent. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because Tom had his own variety show for 1 year back in the 70s.
Right.
Was it Across This Land with Stompin Tom? I think
that's what it was called. Filmed. I think it started in Edmonton. They did 2 episodes in Edmonton, and then I think they traveled around. And amazing, that they.
Oh, and he insisted that it all be Canadian artists. It's been. I should read my book again. It's been 1.5 years since I stopped writing it, so I'm like, I should double check what the title of the show was. But I know you can't find that. You can't find that show on DVD or anything. But you're right. He started in Edmonton. They went across the country, and it was all. He insisted it all be all Canadian artists, and they just did 1 season of that. So
he had, in his time, he had amazing television coverage. That was a big thing. That Yuri Krejcik, who was his manager and business partner for many years, told me that the other 2 things that boosted his career. One was there was a weekly publication that was, I don't know if it was attached to all the major newspapers on the Saturday or not, but it's called the Star Weekly. It was produced. Produced by the Toronto Star, and Tom got a front page cover on that, and Yuri told me that was a huge boost for his career. It expanded his audience substantially. And the other thing was when he got married on the Elwood Glover show, the luncheon date show, at the original 4 Seasons Hotel on Jarvis Street, this motor inn kind of thing on Jarvis Street, and right downtown Toronto. There's Tom and Lena getting married, and Maybe later there's a couple of stories I can tell about that, but you can imagine those were enormous boosts to his career.
And I wrote about that in my book about him getting married because Tiny Tim had gotten married on American television. And when Yuri came to Stompin' Tom, he said, I don't want it to look like a gimmick like what Tiny Tim did.
Yeah.
And for Tom, he genuinely, anyone who reads either Tom's books, because Tom's books are also great. I promote my own book, but Tom's are also wonderful. Tom wrote 2 volumes of autobiography, the Connors Tone, which is this one, and the first one which is called Before the Fame, which I think I like better. I've read both of them twice, but he had a rough childhood, and he traveled the country end to end, kind of making friends and family wherever he went. And he would, years later, he'd be hitchhiking, and somebody would invite him in, and he'd stay all night, and they'd end up having a kitchen party or whatever. And so for him, when he got married on TV, he said it was a way to invite all the fans and friends he had across the country. So he genuinely did it, I think, from a good place is what he was.
There's a story in my book. I won't read from it, but it's on the 1990 tour. It was this comeback tour, and he had been away for 13 years, and the country was in the middle of a political upheaval with free trade and the Meech Lake Accord, and Tom was on this anti-Brian Mulroney rant. Every show was, the worst prime minister in the history of the world. All of this, but as we would come into these small towns, my job, I was the tour manager, so I was running the kind of the show, not just I was running the operation and had to keep an eye on security and that kind of thing. And invariably, I remember one time in particular in Walkerton, Ontario, playing the arena, 2:00 in the afternoon, doing a sound check, and this guy is banging on the door, and somebody says, "There's this guy who wants to meet with Tom." So I go out to see him, and he's this old guy. He's very insistent. He's convinced that Tom spent a couple of days at his house on a binge back in 1966. I was 65, and this guy is convinced that Tom will know who he is and want to have him come in and maybe even share the stage with him. He thought, and so I went back and talked to Tom and said, "I have no idea who this guy is," because there were so many people like this. He, as you said, he would just go from kitchen to kitchen and hitchhiking, and somebody would say, come on over for dinner, and 3 days later the wife is going, "Well, when's he going to leave? He's been here for 3 days."
And Tom had so many. There were probably literally hundreds across the country. I think it was Al Widmeyer I talked to, who was in a band with Tom, and he said you'd be driving from, say, Toronto, you had to get to Thunder Bay to start the tour, and he'd pull into all these little towns and go, "Oh, I just need to drop into this bar and say hi to so and so, or I need to."
Oh, Charlie, it was infuriatingly boring. and we were married to his location. We couldn't go off and do what we wanted to do. We had to the Brockdan Hotel in Sudbury. We weren't on the road 3 hours, and we were already having a beer at the Brockdan Hotel in Sudbury on our way to Kenora. And we spend another 3 hours just sitting there watching Tom smoke cigarettes and drink beer with these rubbies from the Brockdan. And we're sitting there going, "We'd like to get to town so we can have dinner, Tom."
So he left space between dates, didn't he? He wouldn't he wasn't on a rush to go town to town.
They seemed like weeks. They were days.
Just so you can stop and have a beer along the way in every small town. He's unusual in that he made fans. I talk about this when he started at the Horseshoe Tavern in the late 1960s. He would use his breaks to go table to table, and he would make fans table to table. And then he did the same in every town he went to. He got to know them, so that next time he came back to town, he was their buddy, and they wanted to come see him perform.
Tom could have run a business course on how to make it in the music business. I've seen him certainly do that. In the first tour in 1990, he would sit at the autograph table. He hadn't been on the road for 13 years. So the appetite, people came to the shows thinking that Tom was going to, sorry, my phone is ringing here.
That's all right.
It's my guitar player. People would come and they think that Tom would be coming to save the country. So, they were, anyway, he would spend as much time as he needed, sometimes 2 or 3 hours at the autograph table until the line was completely gone. But I also saw him do things like we were playing the Forum at Ontario Place in Toronto, and on our way to Ottawa, And on the way, it's a caravan of cars. Tom in the Suburban, me in the van, Conrad and his Volvo, and so there were like 3 or 4 cars.
That's right. There's 3 or 4. He didn't have a big truck. You guys went in a
No.
series of cars, and he insisted on being at the front.
And the goddamn walkie-talkie want to know where you are at all times.
You all had to have I just want to clarify for people who don't know. You all had a walkie-talkie on you that you had to keep on always. Yeah. And if Tom didn't know where you were, you got in trouble.
Yeah. Trouble.
Do you want to tell the story about the time you went to dinner without checking with him first? Because you guys arrived early.
Oh boy. Oh boy. I almost it almost turned into he told me later he came within an inch of punching me in the face. He was so mad at me. I knew that I'd been through this, so I knew the strain on the band. And we had been on the road 2 months at that point in time. The band needed to be. We had to open up the corral gates and let the band kind of do their thing, So there were 5 of us. We got to Quebec City. I got on the walkie-talkie, and there was no answer. And I went, "Oh, this is our chance." I thought maybe he's having a meeting with somebody. He's not answering the walkie-talkie
because you guys arrived ahead of him, right?
Yeah. Well, I thought he was already there, but anyway, I say to the guys, okay, we got to get to town. Like, come on, we need a night for ourselves. So we get to town. I turn off the walkie-talkie. We have a great time. We come back, I don't know, 10 o'clock that night or whatever. And boy, he wants to see the band. We want to have a meeting. Yuri Krejcik, who again, business partner, knew Tom for many minutes. Yuri was 19 when they met, and they worked together for many decades. And Yuri told me a year or so ago, we had lunch one day, and he told me the meetings drove him crazy. And I said, "Oh my God, I thought it was just us." Meeting. Love to have these meetings. I couldn't take it that night. I hid in. I'm ashamed to say I hid in the bathroom and feigned illness and left the meeting to the band. And the meeting was basically Tom just sitting there holding court and preaching to us and telling us how things could have gone wrong had he not been able to get a hold of us. As Robbie, my drummer, said, Tom always said, "You never know what could happen." As though, what the hell could happen? Anyway,
it's funny.
We came back. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, at one point when he was on tour, his father was driving the equipment van or something and disappeared. And I wonder if that's what drove him to make sure he knew where everybody was at all times.
You know what? When I read that piece, Charlie, that's exactly what I thought. I think you're a very wise man. I think that must have been, even though Tom is not very honest in the book about a lot of these things, and that's one of them. He doesn't expand on the stress and the anger that he must have felt that day. But boy, it must have, he didn't know whether he was going to have a PA system for the show that night. I mean, as a band leader for 40 some odd years, I know the kind of stress that a situation like this can turn into. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that might have been the one that tipped the tail.
That's where it came from. Yeah. We've got a couple comments here. I'm not going to read through all the comments. Some of them are like my family, my Aunt Carol and my friends, Craig and Andrea, and I want to say hi to them. But Chris Maureen Orr, so I assume it's probably Chris and Maureen Orr, he wrote this. We were talking about Tom and his kitchen parties. Many years ago on a trip to PEI, we met Stompin Tom. What a great guy he was. We'd gotten lost in PEI and asked for directions from, here, I'll bring it up on the screen. And we asked for some directions from some guy who said he was having a party later. And did we want to come? What a great time we had. That's so PEI. If you know Prince Edward Island, it's like, you're lost, come to a party. Stompin Tom's playing.
Yeah. Sure.
I love that. And then you do have a comment from a friend of yours, Alan Dalton. He said, "Hi, Duncan. How have you been? Keep well. Can't wait to see you in PEI and at the Poop Cafe." Yeah.
So Al used to live in Oakville, and I think I think it might have been this year, he moved to PEI. He and his wife moved to PEI. But the night that we played Oakville, the last time I saw Alan was just down the street from the cafe that we played in Oakville. There was a chain. It's a franchise. It's called, I'm serious. It's called the Poop Cafe.
I thought it was being funny.
No. And the seats you sit on are toilets. They have the fart zone at the back of the cafe. That's the whole shtick. And no, it wasn't packed the night we were there. I don't know if that's a sign of
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but so So I've got friends on Long Island watching this. Phil and Cheryl are watching this.
Oh,
I've
wonderful.
got family in BC and Washington State watching this show. So maybe they'll pipe in and make a comment.
Yeah, at some point, I think we might take questions if people have a question.
That'd be great.
My friend Sean is watching from Ontario. My friend David is watching from Sheffield, England. So we got them from all over, Duncan.
Nice.
So now I could talk to you forever, but I was going to ask. We're going to try to keep it to like 45 minutes to an hour. But so how did you meet Tom in the first place? Like how did it come about that you ended up playing for him, recording with him?
In 89, 90, the country was not just dealing with Meech Lake and all of the free trade and all of that, but we were in the early stages of just a brutal recession. Just the country was unemployed. We saw it crossing the country. We'd pull into some of these small towns. The 1990 tour was 75 dates over 6 months. And
that was his big return after having been away for like a dozen years.
Right.
And you were tour manager on that one,
yeah,
right?
That's right. And it meant that we went into every town, whether we sold 200 tickets or 2,000 tickets, we went into that town. And there were some towns in the West, the manufacturing or the resource communities, like Trail, BC, for example. We were in Trail, BC. We might have had 250 people. And there were people in Brandon, Manitoba. There were people in the front row crying because they thought Tom had come back to save the country. They were unemployed, or they were in things were in bad shape. So I was called in because the tour director needed an experienced person, kind of just to be there, at these gigs to make sure there was electricity for the sound men and make sure there was merchandise tables, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, and he knew that I had experience with this, and I was a realtor in Toronto at the time, and I was looking at the recession that was coming up, and I thought I can afford to take a bit of time off work and do this because the opportunity to it was an historic Maclean's magazine, the CBC. This was a national story. Zosky got involved, the Morningside thing. So it was to be a major player in the inner circle for this was like an opportunity of a lifetime. So during those 6 months, I became friends with Tom, and I continued to go up to the house after the tour and play chess and hang out. And then one day he takes me out to Chinese. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was up just hanging out, and he had a furnace room in his house. Yeah. That's where he hung out. and it was the furnace room. It was kind of the workshop. There's a picture in my book of the workshop, and he's got all his tools on the back wall. You can't make this shit up, He's got all his tools on the back wall and his chessboard set up, and he's got a letter from the prime minister, all his paraphernalia. There's nothing fancy about this. And bathrooms, his and hers, and the beer fridge is over there, And
now, is that the room he had a bar in? Because he actually had a bar too.
Oh no, that came later.
That came later. Okay.
Yeah, there's a story around that too. But
okay.
Where was I going with this story?
Sorry. He was in the furnace room, and you knew him from the tour.
I love this.
Sorry to interrupt.
We're sitting there playing music, and it's it's February or something, and he's got one of these old, I must have been an oil furnace or something, but the fan starts going, and you can't hear yourself thinking this because the furnace is going, and we're trying to play music and tune this thing up. Can you turn that damn thing off, Tommy? Well, no, it's going to get cold upstairs if we turn it off. So, you got to. Here's a guy, one of the most famous musicians, maybe at the time, probably the most popular musician in the entire country. And here we are sitting in a goddamn furnace room, rehearsing or playing music. Nothing fancy about this guy at all. So certain charm to all of that, Charlie, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. I wish I could have known him. All the stories I've heard. I don't know. He might not have liked me, but it would have been fun to know him, I bet.
He wouldn't have liked you, no.
No, I don't think so. I don't really drink. I drink Diet Coke, Duncan. That's all I drink.
No,
if you don't drink beer, I don't think you'd fit in. I don't smoke.
Well, you wouldn't be allowed in the house. That's really.
I just want to say, okay, a friend of mine, Carol, just said hi, and this is very interesting. But here's a couple comments just for you. My family and I saw you play in Peterborough. I assume it's for you because I don't play in Peterborough. A few years ago, it was so nice to hear live Stompin' Tom music again. So I thought you'd appreciate.
I don't know which show that was. We did a show in Peterborough back in '93 where Tom was given the key to the city of Peterborough, and I recorded the whole the show off the board, and
Wow.
I've got an audio clip of the exchange between the mayor of Peterborough and Toronto, and he's in tears like this because Peterborough was where he earned his moniker,
Yeah.
Stompin', right? So
Yeah.
this was I love the scene. We're at the end of it's in the arena. We're at the end of the stages at the end of the arena. And I don't know if anybody has a picture of this, but there's a picture of Queen Elizabeth behind him and then Stompin' Tom. And I thought, oh, what a great, because he was a monarchist, you know,
Yeah.
through and through. He would have loved a picture like that.
Oh yeah, when he received the Queen's 50th anniversary or 50th celebration, they gave out gold medal, and 50 significant Canadians, one from each of the 50 years that she'd been on the throne, were chosen to receive an award, and he was one of them. And I saw him talk about it, and he broke down in tears just talking about it in an interview.
Yeah. And he was allowed to wear his hat in front of it.
That's right. At that event, normally you have to take your hat off.
That's a big deal.
Adrian Clarkson, I think, who was a friend of his and Governor General, helped arrange that he could wear his hat. They decided they would consider it like religious headdress. So he was allowed to wear his hat.
That's a good compromise. He was also allowed to wear his hat at Rideau Hall when he was given the Order of Canada. And he was also allowed to smoke. And I love that Adrian is a friend of my shows. She's performed with us a number of times and has been a big fan and supporter of my show, the touring show that I'm on the road with. And she told me the story of the day that he was given the Order of Canada. I don't know how many people were receiving the award that day, but again, for my American friends, this is a big deal. You get the Order.
It's like the Medal of Freedom in the States.
It's a big deal. So Tom is allowed to smoke. He goes to an open window to smoke, so he blows the smoke out the window. But he comes back in and he reeks of cigarette smoke. And so she didn't tell me who it was, but if I look at the picture, I can probably guess. But one of the recipients came up to her and said, "The guy stinks of cigarette. Can you get him out of here or something?" And she said, "No, he's winning an award." So again, you know, if you want to just sort of take the pretense out of an event, just invite Tom. He'll take
that actually at that. I think it was at I think it was the Queen's luncheon. They were having this big fancy meal, and Tom asked for a ham sandwich because he didn't like fancy food. So they brought him a ham sandwich and a warm beer.
Well, for the rehearsal, what am I saying? You know, I think we had one rehearsal before the 1993 tour. Nothing fancy on this front, but the catering was a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken and coleslaw.
He sounds very down to earth.
Really down to earth.
So I'm gonna go to a couple of comments, and then I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions.
Yeah,
because there's one here. It's Brian Crockett. I think it's might be
Brian.
Brian, and he wrote, Duncan, Brian and Barb here. Tell us a Tom and Bobby story too. Later, Bob loved Sudbury Saturday Night Cloggeroo. Bud the Spud. How did they become favorites? What's a Tom and Bobby story?
Thank you for that question. That's great. Bob McNiven was my guitar player and my musical buddy and my best friend for 40 years. He just died last May. And Bob toured. He toured with Tom not more than anybody, but he did a lot of tours with Tom. And I asked Mickey Andrews about this years later. And I've never talked to any other musician about this, but to the best of my knowledge, on our tours, Tom never tuned his own guitar. He always gave it to Bob. And Bob would take the guitar, go off and bring it back, and it was in tune, and that was it. If it ever went out of tune during a show, well, tough shit. Like that's, at first Bob, lifetime musician, educated in music, as opposed to Tom, who has no education in music. So, they were in different wavelengths musically. At first, Bob, he agreed to come on the tour, but at first he thought, geez, I don't know, this is kind of hokey crap. Or, he couldn't quite get into it. But by the end, I don't know, after a week or two or three, and he saw the genius of some of this material, then he changed his tune, and he became quite a good friend of Tom's at the end. And so
Wow.
thanks for that question, Barb.
Yeah,
and
no,
Brian.
it's funny because there's a quote that I loved. I remember when I interviewed you, I love this quote, and I transcribed the whole interview, but I knew right away. I was like, this is what I'm going to use. And you talked about the Stompin' Tom, the challenges of touring with him because of all the rules, and it wasn't always easy. And then you said, but it was all worthwhile. It's like playing Maple Leaf Gardens with Wayne Gretzky as your winger. It doesn't get any better than that. It was a difficult job in many ways, but it defined the rest of my musical life. I feel like I'm a pretty lucky guy for having experienced that. And I love that quote, like how it affected you a great deal.
Is there a more Canadian moment than playing the hockey song on Parliament Hill in front of hundreds of thousands of flag-waving Canadians, broadcast coast to coast in the CBC with Mr. Canada himself? I mean, is there a more Canadian? Is there anything a hokey banjo player from Bar River, Ontario could experience than that?
You got Canada Day, Parliament Hill, Stompin' Tom, hockey.
Wow.
And the Canadians, Montreal Canadiens, had just won the Stanley Cup, right?
Yeah. And we had the Stanley Cup there. And
I've actually got I've got a few seconds of that performance. You shared it on YouTube. I'm going to play it, and it will be muted while it plays. Just 45 seconds of Tom introducing. Here we go.
I was going to do a different song here, and I'm going to surprise everybody. I was supposed to do a different song. We rehearsed it last night and the whole thing. I changed my mind. Something has happened in Canada on the 100th year of the Stanley Cup. I want to dedicate this song to all those well-bred people from the Ottawa Valley. Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight.
There we go. And I stopped it there because I didn't know how much I could play legally, but I'll post that video. I'll share it on my Facebook page later. You've shared it on YouTube, but you were there. You were there at that performance.
Yeah. First of all, I think you need a new lawyer, Charlie, because this law-abiding thing that you're into, screw that, man.
You would have just played the whole song.
Yeah, well, when you're as old as I am, who gives a damn?
I know. Once it started, I was like, people are going to be upset that we don't play the song. I did a screenshot, Duncan, and I believe if you look over on the left, I see a banjo, and that's
me. Yeah,
there you are.
Greg Street beside me, and then
there's you, Stompin' Tom, and the Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup, yeah.
Did you touch the Stanley Cup?
I did not. As a lifetime hockey player, I continue to play today. It's the what's the word? It's the Holy Land, this is it.
So now, Tom, just in that intro alone, he gave me so many things I wanted to ask you about. Like he said, this isn't what we rehearsed last night, so we're going to throw it out and do something else. You didn't even really rehearse that much, did you? Did he totally surprise you in that moment?
No, the night before, we were there a day before, maybe even 2 days before. Tom, you have to. So the night before, he calls me into his room. He and his good friend Gate Lapine were there, and Brian Edwards, his tour manager, was there. And the CBC or somebody to do with the event had asked him to we were going to do Bud the Spud and It's Canada Day Up Canada Way. Oh, okay. And they asked him if he would do the hockey song instead of Bud the Spud. Now, they didn't tell him they were bringing out the Stanley Cup because they weren't sure that they could get the cup over from Montreal in time for the show.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't know. No, it was a surprise that when the Stanley Cup came out. So I read in my book that he goes over, he had been in the Confederation room on Parliament Hill. Here's one of the most revered rooms. This is where all the big decisions are made. This is where, a history is made. And Tom's sitting there with a cooler of beer and a big ashtray, sitting there smoking cigarettes before the show. So he had already had a few beers by the time we got out to the show. And my worry was, just for a split second, I looked over at my guitar player Bob, and we had that look, because he picked up the Stanley Cup, and I was worried when he put it over his head. I wasn't sure how heavy it was, and I thought, wouldn't that have been a disaster if he had fallen over and dropped the damn cup? But it was it all worked out okay. But I was a little nervous there just for.
Can you imagine the headlines the next day? Stompin'
Yeah.
Tom breaks Stanley Cup on Canada.
Oh, geez. Well, it would make for a trivia question, and somewhere down the road.
So Duncan, as I assumed, I sent you a little script, and we barely followed it because I could talk to you forever. But, so you ended up I'm just going to jump ahead a little. You recorded with Tom, you toured with Tom.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to touch on is something that so many people told me, which I was unaware of, was how smart Tom was. Like, he was really well read. He studied like world religions, and you told me a story about how he'd do brain exercises just to keep himself sharp and stuff.
He told me one time. I don't know if it's in his books or not.
It's probably in my book. I don't know if it's in yours.
Okay, the one where he's he has a job. He didn't have many jobs in his life, but it was kind of a, it was the worst kind of job for a guy like Tom, because there was nothing to do. He was bored, right? So there were a bunch of little drawers for nails and screws and stuff, kind of like just a big square of these little drawers, and they all had numbers and letters on them. Right. And so he just took it upon himself to memorize the pattern on this thing, and it was like, he took him an hour or so, but it was just he said, I just did it to occupy myself. And the guy knew he had lyrics in his head for thousands of songs. I've seen him sit around a campfire all night and just do train songs.
Wow.
Like just train songs.
Yeah. You told me about those drawers. Somebody would say, so fourth drawer down, third in, what's in it? And he'd say, 1/8 in.
Well, his Wurlitzer in his bar. He had a bar at home at the end. There's a story behind that too, but so he had a Wurlitzer, and
that's a jukebox, right?
Jukebox, yeah. And I was over one day, and he said, what do you want to listen to? And I said, put on, I don't know, the Consumer or whatever. And he had a remote. He didn't have to leave this, so he just punched in A7, and up came the Consumer, whatever it was, And I said, geez, you know the coordinates for all of these? Because there were hundreds in there.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, I know them all. And he had Gordon Lightfoot over a few years ago, and he put some of Gordon's songs in the Wurlitzer so that when he dropped in to visit, he could play some of his songs too. So,
wow. Yeah, and that his memory for lyrics, like you say, I heard people say he knew like 20 lyrics to 2,500 different songs or something.
Oh, more, I'm sure more than that.
Wow.
There was one time in we're out west somewhere, Calgary, and we were doing Okanagan Okie was a song that he didn't do very often. In fact, maybe he did it once in all the shows I did with him. But because we were in the area, he wanted to do Okanagan Okie. We didn't rehearse it or anything. He just started strumming. But he made the mistake of he started in the wrong key, and his brain couldn't he walked around the stage asking the different band, either in the middle of the show. He came over and asked Bob or Conrad or whatever what the first line of the song was. And he came to me, and I'm not a lyric guy at all, but for some reason I knew the first few words. So he thanked me from the stage, and he started strumming. He still couldn't get it. And then the bell went off, and he went, oh, it's not in the key of C. It's in the key of G. He strums the G, and then the words just flow out.
Wow.
So, there's a connection. Yeah. What goes on in a brain like that? I don't know.
Amazing. So you worked with Tom, and then after he died, in 2014, the year he passed away in 2013, you held a birthday celebration, and that sort of led to, didn't it? Stories and stuff.
He used to invite. Either he or Lena would call and say, we're having a birthday party or a barbecue or something up at the house. Can you come up and bring the band and play some music? And he liked to have musicians around him, and it was easy to just call me because we all knew his material. We all knew him. It was a very comfortable, so we could come into the house and hang out and play music, and there'd be a party and stuff. And so the last one we did, I think it was his 75th birthday party.
You sent me a picture. I'm going to share that while you're talking.
And it was great. And so when he died, I realized that we weren't going to get the invitation to the party. So I better host my own party, which I did at the Eaton Tavern in downtown Toronto. It was a seedy bar with a pool table, exactly his kind of bar. And I invited, pretty much the who's who of the Canadian music establishment. And I couldn't accept. I mean, everybody wanted to perform, and I couldn't say yes to everybody. Didn't have room. Sold it out within hours, and so that was like, there was obviously a real appetite. We needed a little dose of nationalism at that point, because I think our prime minister at the time was kind of downplaying everything Canada, and so everyone needed a little boost. That's what I was told by many of the people in attendance, and so one thing led to another. I started to get invitations from theaters and festivals to bring the show to their town. So I kind of wrote. I'm not a playwright like you, Charlie, but I kind of created a show in my. So my show isn't, a lot of tribute shows, and I hate that word tribute because it's not really indicative of what we do. But I don't come out and I don't tell the Stompin Tom story. Right. I think, if I can just, I think. For me, it's always been about the music. The genius of the man is not just the novelty songs, the Bud the Spuds, the Sudbury Saturday Nights, etc. But Songbird Valley, My Last Farewell. There are, Mariza. There are country songs. There are folk songs. He's really a folk singer more than he is, I think, more than a country song. But I think in the years and decades to come, and maybe you and I will be dead when this happens, but I think it's his music that will survive. And that was my love for doing this tour, is the music. Whiskey Jack, we've been doing this for a long time. We have our own kind of sound. We're a vocal band, so we spent a lot of time on the vocals. We did a barbershop quartet version of his song Alberta Rose. That, so I like to think that our show is more, it's my stories or stories of guys in the band with him that the audience really embrace. They love they want to know what he's like. So I'm more than happy to share those stories. And the music is performed by my band is. These are these are virtuosos. So you're taking what some people think is a hillbilly music, and you're giving it a sophisticated arrangement with performances to boot. And all of a sudden, I think these songs come alive. And the best evidence for me was we did a classical musical festival in Niagara-on-the-Lake back in 2017, and we were playing for people that were into Bach and Beethoven and all that kind of stuff. And here we were it was sesquicentennial. So we were the token Canadian content, perhaps. I don't know why we were there, but anyway, it was great. And we got a standing ovation. We had them in the palm of our hands because we gave them a new way to look at this guy and this music.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to happen in the years to come.
Yeah, you said that. I remember when another quote I used from you in the book was, "I've often tried to imagine the legend of Stompin' Tom. I think his song catalog will hold up very well, better than most of them. As Tom's songs get interpreted and explored, the more I appreciate the genius. That summit might surprise people in the years to come." And I use that in my book. Where you're going now. Your band Whiskey Jack, you do a show called Stories and Songs of Stompin' Tom. And obviously, COVID has slowed that down. But I did want to
a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately. But just while you're talking about the lyrics, I remember you saying to me the lyrics for Moon Man Newfie in particular are just so. Well, do you want to perform a little? Why don't I let you just perform a little bit?
I'll just. I don't want to sing. I'll just sing a little bit of this. But sometimes when I introduce this song, I tell people to listen closely to the lyrics. That some of the better poets in the country, like Margaret Atwood, for example, she couldn't write a song like this for the life of her, and she's a genius. You might think it's goofy, but the man in the moon is a newfie. He's sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory. Sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory. One night he strayed till the Milky Way and cast his net upon it. He spied the tail of a great big whale and harpooned Halley's Comet. He never had a punt for the fish that he caught, so he had to use the Big Dipper. And the sun, by Jove, is a very good stove, cooking up spelts and kippers. Yeah, you might think it's goofy, but the man in the moon is a newfie. He's sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory. Sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory. One night he strayed till the Milky Way and cast his net upon it. He spied the tail of a great big whale and harpooned Halley's Comet. He never had a putt for the fish that he caught, so he had to use the Big Dipper. And the Sun Bodger was a very good stove for cooking up smelts and kippers. Yeah, you might think it's goofy, but the man in the moon is an oofy. He's sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory. Sailing on to glory, away in the golden dory.
Wow, that's great. I love it. It's so good. I love he never had a pot for the fish that he caught, so he used the big dip. What I can't say it even, but just the lyrics are so clever, and he's so inventive with rhyme. I mean, yeah. So now you ended up. I could listen to you play. You probably don't want to. Do you want to do another song, or are you good?
Well, I'm good, but maybe I'll just mention too. You know, he's famous for a lot of things. Certainly, maritime songs. Bud the Spud from PEI, and he's done some Newfoundland songs, and he's done some Nova Scotia songs, but a lot of Ontario songs. But he's famous for, another one of the reasons that he's endearing to the country, and really one of the reasons probably that he got the success he got early on. And Gate Lapine, he was the amazing, what an amazing guy this is, and I'm in the middle of talking to him at length and perhaps doing a feature on him, but he's the bartender who received him the day in 1964 when Tom walks in, and looking like a bum with a guitar on his hand, asking for how much a beer is. It's a classic story, but Gate tells me that he took up residence at the Maple Leaf Hotel in Timmins at that time and played 14 straight months. And it wasn't until Tom started playing his own songs, about the towns and villages nearby. And he does. Let me see if I can think of what's that. Ferryman, ferryman, have you seen my Mary Ann? In my search for her, I've been round the bay and back again. From Espanola to Manitoulin, across the channel I'm bound. I heard a story in Tobermory that my gal was a knowing sound. I was right behind her, but I couldn't find her. To Meaford I'm away, down to Collingwood. There I stood in the bottom of the Georgian Bay. Oh, ferryman, ferryman, have you seen my Mary Ann? In my search for her, I've been round the bay and back again.
Wow.
So his ability he connected there with, 8 communities?
Around that bay. So everywhere he went, they were like, he said our name. He said the name of our town.
So we played pretty much all those communities. And I always used to start at the beginning of the night saying, whenever your community is mentioned in a song, I want a lot of noise from you people.
Right.
And so they were on the edge of their seat, and that was the one song that.
Wow. That's so great. I love hearing when I hear my girlfriend actually performs as well, and she plays ukulele, and she has a little duo as well. But anyway, when she does it, like a woman's voice with a ukulele doing some of Tom's songs, you would never guess they're Tom songs. They sound like traditional standards, like folk standards or whatever. And that's the quality you get when you. Anyway, you're getting all kinds of lovely comments here in the comment section.
Well, I'm going to mention, speaking of ukulele. So this is of all the we've done a lot of CDs over the years, including Stompin Tom CDs. This is the most recent one, and I think this is the gold standard of taking some classic Tom songs and bringing them just to maybe modernizing them is a good way to put it. But there's a song on here called "My Last Farewell," and my guitar player, ukulele player, accordion player, Douglas John Cameron, he's a business and a musical partner of mine. He starts a song called "My Last Farewell" on the ukulele. I think it's a brilliant CD that I'm promoting like hell right now.
And that's Whiskey Jack, is it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And if you go to hellooutthere.ca, click on the book or the merchandise or whatever, you can. There it is.
There you go. Hellooutthere.ca.
Right.
And people can get your CD. They can also get your book,
Yes.
right? Now, did you
Yes.
want to give away a copy of the book or the CD? We talked about that, or do you want to?
How about a couple? No, I'll give away a couple. So back in I don't know, a few years ago, I promoted I had a quiz, a contest for the fans. I have a big email list of fans that have signed up to keep track of my show. So I sent out it was a quiz, and I gave away a package of T-shirts and a whole bunch of stuff. Anyway, there's a couple of questions on this quiz that are kind of a little difficult. So I thought if people can reply, and I'm just going to give, the first one. Okay. So
okay. Now, is the person who gets this, are they getting a book or a CD?
First one gets a book.
They get a book.
Maybe I'll throw a CD in there too.
We'll see. So you got to comment. So pay attention. First person who comments with the right answer. Can you see the comments, Duncan?
Yeah. No, I can't.
Okay. Because I can. You'll have to tell them after you read it. I'll read you what the comments are. Okay. Here we go.
Here we go. So it's like a quiz. Multiple choice. How hard can this be, folks? Tom is called Dr. Stompin Tom because A, he's a gynecologist before he learned to play the guitar. B, he used to play doctor when he was a little boy. C, his mother wanted him to be a doctor when he grew up. D, he was given an honorary doctorate by Dalhousie University. E, none of the above.
A, B, C, D, or E. Whoever gets the right answer, and I know the right answer for this one, so I can tell you. Whoever answers it first is going to win a copy of Duncan's book.
You came really close to answering that, didn't you, Charlie?
I did. Really D, Craig Galbraith gets it. It's the honorary degree, right?
Okay, yeah.
So there we go. So Craig,
is your girlfriend in the background there?
She is. Could you hear her laughing?
Well, I think you next time you should whack him across the head with a copy of his book or something if he's going to give out the answer. He's not allowed to give out the answer.
Did I almost give it away? Okay, Craig got it first. It was D. Okay, now and he's getting your book, and I'm going to write that down.
Yeah. No, what do you mean it was D? It was none of the above. It was E.
Oh, it was E. You're right, because
it wasn't Dalhousie.
He got it from St. Thomas.
Tricky, eh?
You were tricky. Okay, Craig, you didn't. Craig, you didn't win. And somebody said St. Thomas, but they didn't win. It had to be E, none of the above, didn't it?
If somebody said, is it St. Thomas? Is that the one?
It is St. Thomas that was the first degree.
So somebody said St. Thomas?
Yeah.
Give them the book.
Okay, Scotty V gets it. There you go. I thought you just had the university wrong, to be honest, and I didn't want to say.
Charlie, what kind of quiz do you think we run here at Whiskey Jack headquarters?
I was like, jeez. Duncan thinks it was Dal, it was St. Thomas. It's okay. Okay.
Whoa.
Scotty V gets it then. Okay,
we're gonna punish you later.
I'm sorry. Okay, now we're gonna give away one of your CDs.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do, just so people know, if you've commented here, I will get in touch with you tomorrow, and I'll reach out to you and message you, and we'll get an address, and I'll get Duncan to send stuff to you.
Well, the one I had chosen, unfortunately, I already gave the answer to, so I'm going to have to choose another one. Okay. So Stompin Tom Connors appeared on a special broadcast of Late Night with Conan O'Brien in February of 2004. What was the venue for this show? A, Massey Hall. B, Air Canada Centre. C, Casino Rama. D, the Elgin Theatre. Or E, Horseshoe Tavern.
Now we'll just wait. I'm going to see. I was quiet that time.
Very good, Charlie.
I'm learning.
You're great restraint.
Now, Alan Dalton commented a minute ago. I wanted to comment. He said he's read both of our books, since you're giving away a book and I'm about to give away a book as well. But he said he got yours at the Stompin Tom Center and mine should be there, which it isn't. Mine isn't there. So I agree with him. Mine should be there. Can you read the choices again? A, B, C, D, and E? Because I think I know what it is.
Okay. A is Massey Hall. B is Air Canada Centre. C is Casino Rama. D is Elgin Theatre, and E is Horseshoe Tavern.
Okay, let me see. We have all of them except B. Is the correct answer the Elgin Theatre, D?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay,
Elgin
so
Theatre.
I'm going to look for the first D. Here it is. The first D was Amanda Staples. I had to go through the comments. There it is. She said D. So I knew. I was pretty sure it was the Elgin. Somebody else wrote Elgin, but you had it. Well, sorry. Alan Dalton wrote Elgin before she said D, which was Elgin. So now what do we do?
Oh, no, Alan's, no, sorry, Alan. No, No.
You don't get it that you got to say A, B, C, D, or E, right?
I'll send Alan something, but no.
Okay, there we go.
Alan's a good buddy, so no. That's
Okay.
We'll give it to Amanda, and
Amanda
the winner should, I guess, message you their mailing address, and I'll put this stuff in the mail.
Yeah, they can send me a message through the Stompin Tom site, or I'll reach out to them tomorrow and I'll get you the information. Now, I'm going to give away a copy of my book.
Yeah.
And what I want to know, and I'm not going to do multiple choice because I'm not that nice. What was Tom's first? I'm leaving your website up there the whole time so people can order stuff. What was Tom's first #1 hit? And I think what people think it is, it isn't. So anybody who can name Stompin' Tom's first #1 hit, I'm going to send you a copy of my book. So Duncan, while we're waiting for that to come in, we had talked about you possibly reading from your book. You've told us a number of stories where we've been an hour. Was there anything you wanted to tell that either a story from the book or that you didn't share? Or because I could, like I say, you and I could probably do 3 of these.
Yeah. No, we got you and I we talk. We can talk, Charlie.
We can. And you have great stories. It's not Bud the Spud. Bud the Spud was, people think that was his first #1, but it only went to like 26.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Tilsonburg.
I think somebody will do a dissertation someday on why he never did get radio airplay. But anyway, that's a different story. I'll just tell one more quick story.
Okay.
It happened in Carleton Place, Ontario, and it speaks to the line that you showed on Canada Day, the well-bred people from the Ottawa Valley.
Yes.
So there was a reporter or a columnist, I think, for the Ottawa Sun, named Earl McCrae. Earl he's dead now, but he was a bit of a rogue, a rascal, and he loved to stir the pot. That was one of his things. And he was a real character, an old school reporter, right? The hard drinking, hard smoking kind of that. So he wrote one time that because Ottawa started playing the hockey song, I think it was in 1992 or 93, and that the royalties from that ended up paying for Tom's new addition on his house, which turned into a bar. He told me that years later. So
yeah,
he used to thank Ottawa senators from the stage. So we're in Carleton Place, and that controversy about Earl had written a thing saying how embarrassed he was by the hockey song, and he was embarrassed for Canada. It was a bad song, and those yokels from the Ottawa Valley, those inbred yokels. It was really a horrendous, slanderous thing for anybody, for the newspaper to publish this. And Tom got up in arms over this, and he got interviewed by Barbara Frum and NPR in the States and everybody over this controversy. The guy knew how to get publicity. So we're in Carleton Place, and so he had gotten a huge photograph of Earl McCrae's face. And during the intermission, he took his board back there, his plywood board back there, and he taped a picture of Earl's face to his board. And he comes out for the second show, and he holds it up and shows the crowd, which is in the Ottawa Valley.
Yeah.
Shows the crowd the picture of Earl McCrae on his board, and he takes the board and he throws it rather vigorously to the stage, and he ends up stomping on it for the whole show. And the crowd went nuts. So
because he'd called them all inbreds. So
you gotta love that,
It's funny, when I played that clip, I was going to say there's so many things I could ask you about. One, I wanted to ask you about that well-bred comment from the Ottawa Valley. Yeah, I love that story. That's a great story, Duncan. It's so cool that you were there for that. Like so many of these things are kind of classic Stompin' Tom stories, the Stanley Cup and his fight with Earl McCrae, and it's so cool you were there. Now our winner, Big Joe Mufferaw, was his first #1. Catch-Up Song did go to #1. A few others did, but Big Joe was. So John Cox, I'll get in touch with you, and you get a copy of the book.
There are French lyrics to that, by the way, Big Joe Mufferaw. Tom's friend Gate Lapine just sent them to me a couple of days ago.
Oh, really?
I've got French lyrics, and he said it was quite the hit in Quebec when at the time, because Gates was his first guest on his TV series in Edmonton all those years ago, and he sang a Big Joe Mufferaw in French in the show. Wouldn't you love to see that on YouTube?
I looked everywhere when I was researching. I spent
it's not there.
Researching the book, and I wasn't able to find those shows. No. So I'm sure somewhere in the CBC archives they exist, but it's to get at them is pretty hard. Yeah. Well, Duncan, I thank you so much for doing this with me. This has been such a treat. You're so great to talk to. I'm going to do a little plug. I want to thank Arts Nova Scotia for their funding. They gave us funding to do a tour, and instead we're doing this. So thanks to them and my publisher, Formac Publishing. Now, my books, when we finish here, I'm going to put up a little slide at the end that will tell you where you can buy my books. And once again, if you want Duncan's book or you want his Whiskey Jack music, and do look for them on the road. Now, you guys are starting to plan. You're going to hit the road again in 2021. That's the hope, right?
That's the hope.
That's the hope. Fingers crossed. So go out there, check out that website, and follow Duncan. He's very active on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. If you look for Whiskey Jack, you'll find stuff. So next week, I'm hoping I'm talking to two people who are both going to do the show, but we don't know which is next week. They were just confirming some schedules. Either Dave Gunning, who toured with Tom and became a friend of his and is a big singer-songwriter in his own right, or Steve Fruitman, who's a journalist who interviewed Tom when he was a teen. Steve was just a teenager, and he interviewed Tom at the Horseshoe Tavern like in 1970 or 71, and he stayed throughout Tom's life, interviewed him, and did his very last interview with him.
Tom's favorite DJ. He's told me that a number of times. Steve Fruitman is Tom's favorite DJ. Maybe the only one he ever liked.
He didn't like journalists a lot, and Steve's agreed to do the show. So the next 2 weeks, we got Dave Gunning and Steve Fruitman. I'm not sure of the order, but I'll announce it soon. And I just want to say thank you so much, Duncan. It's been such a treat. And thanks to everybody who watched. I'm sorry if we haven't responded to all your comments, but we were going to take questions from the audience, but we did comments as we went along. So there you go. So
people can see this. You're going to post this, right?
Yes, it'll be shared on our Facebook, and maybe somebody will reach out. Oh, sorry. Oh, somebody just said, Duncan, what kind of instrument are you playing here? If you go back in the show, he talked about it early on, but what was it called again?
Banjola.
Banjola. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Duncan. And thank you everybody who watched. I had so much fun. It was wonderful. Thanks. Good night.
Good night.